Okay, you're alive.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our ad hoc for this evening. It's 6:12 p.m. and the chair is running a little bit behind, but he'll join us shortly. Just a refresher on what we talked about last week. Finally able to organize everything that we have already addressed here. It's quite a long list. And then this is our remaining these are our remaining manual of rules sections that we have not yet, addressed. Might look a little bit discouraging. However, I think the class ones, I think we all agree the class ones are the heavier ones that we knew coming into this that it would require a lot more time. It was proposed last week that after we finish the class one sections, which may be tonight, then we can possibly do a hybrid proposal where we give the chief an opportunity to look over these, let them kind of sink in, and then we can progress through the class two and then propose those when we are done. Uh, so that is an option that we can talk about in a little bit. Hey, Chair. Welcome.
Hey everyone.
Hey.
Good evening. Sorry, my apologies. Sorry I'm late, y'all. Just walking in the house and had some technical difficulties. Are we live yet, you guys, or not yet?
Yes, we're live, Chair.
Oh, excellent. Well,
Yeah.
welcome everybody. Sorry, my apologies just to jump in to the meeting and interrupt, but glad to see everyone is on and already cooking.
Yeah. I didn't get too far in. So of this past week, I've been working on four things and uh, really three things because these two things are going to be combined. But we talked last week about notification, criminal notification when a member is arrested or involved in some type of police action. We talked about that being combined with 31448, which we agreed really almost said the same thing, although they had somewhat different meanings. So I'll talk about that, how I combine those. And then I created a new section specific to Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights under a section that's not yet defined, and I'll go over that. One coincidental thing that happened, this always seems to happen. So we did talk a lot about Fifth Amendment and the possibility of creating a class two version of that for things that were not necessarily intentional, but and we agreed to keep it as a class one, which is fine. However, I got an email from the chief asking that we consider, if not already, a conversation about making a class two Miranda section. So, and he didn't know that we talked about this. It was just somewhat random, and I don't even know really the context behind the question. I did not talk to the chief personally about it, but I did, nor did I respond by saying that we already agreed to not create a class two. However, that's something that we can readdress maybe after we read the definition. And then finally, gifts and gratuities. We left off last week with this section and how it's pretty strict, but we also don't want to remove the opportunity for our members to uh, interact with the community and gifts of love that we called them last week from the community. We don't want to necessarily decline those, especially when there's relationship opportunities there. So I have a new definition to share with you all this evening. So if you're all ready, I can jump right into them. Okay. So for notification criminal, I just made I can go either way on this, but I actually combined it with 31448. So I'm going to skip to that. It's pretty long, so I'll go ahead and read through this. I'm sorry, I'm using a different app here, so I can't make my screen bigger. So I'll go ahead and read it and hopefully you'll be able to digest it. If not, I can copy it to a Word document and send it out later. So basically, for those who are not with us last week, when an officer or member is arrested or they have police contact that's more than just a traffic citation, there are requirements for them to notify the Oakland Police Department And, that's important to us because, we want to report the misconduct and initiate the investigation. What we don't want is for us not to know about it, period, and or hear about it from another source. So I'll give you an example. If an officer is off duty, arrested for, let's say, drunk in public, then they are required to notify the Oakland Police Department within a reasonable time frame, so then we can start our investigation. And for the most part, I think everyone understands this rule. There's somewhat of archaic language that was in the previous policy or current that we want to change. For example, it said that the officer has to write a memorandum. And one of the discussions last week is, well, what is required in that memorandum? Because we don't want them to incriminate themselves by explaining why they did what they did. And that's not the intent behind it. It's more for just notification, so then OPD can continue with this investigation. So I'll read through this and we can dissect it more. So reporting violations of laws, ordinance, rules, and orders. Members and employees who become aware of violations committed by other members or employees shall report the misconduct as follows. So for class 1 violations and pattern class 2 violations, for any violations of law, ordinance, department rules, or direct orders that constitute a class 1 or class 2 violation that indicates a pattern of misconduct shall be reported within 24 hours or sooner if practical. The report must be made orally and in writing to the members or employees, supervisor, or the Internal Affairs Bureau. Single occurrence class 2 violations, however, if a violation is considered a class 2 that does not indicate a pattern of misconduct, the observing member employee may address the matter through non-disciplinary corrective action where appropriate. However, if a member employee believes that misconduct is grave and or serious, they shall immediately report the incident directly to any member, including the chief of police. The chain of command may be bypassed. So I'll pause there. This section in particular, the current language in the policy says that the member can go contact the chief of police. That was kind of weird because I don't know if everyone knows how to do that. So I think it's more important that they have the freedom to report it to any member, knowing that member is then responsible for reporting it to the higher authorities. Ms. Leonard, I see your hand up.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'd just like to ask if you can enlarge your screen. I can't see what you're reading. It's like
Kathy, we
very,
could
very
barely
tiny.
hear you. I don't know if you're in your settings, if your mic is turned down, but we could hear you, but it's very, very faint. And I think Cap's going to try to enlarge his screen as well, but the application he's using, he's in Genius as well, and there's a quick problem
Is this
solver.
better?
Perfect. So I
Yes,
see
that's much better.
somebody cutting
Hear me now?
I heard what she said. Yeah. So hopefully the formatting's a little off, but I could enlarge it here. Okay. Going back to this, where was I? Oh, this one right here. So it was kind of weird how it says the membership can go to the chief of police. Like I said, not a lot of people know how to do that. And I think the intent behind it was it just shows the power of like reporting misconduct. Like if it's that important that needs to be reported, it can go straight to the chief of police. But we want to expand that to where it's basically any member, and all the members understand this. Like if they're aware of any class 1 especially or pattern class 2 manual of rules sections, then they have reporting requirements, and that is something that everyone understands. That is actually the first week of the academy that we actually teach this. So no one in this organization should ever say that they never knew that we take this seriously and it needs to occur. Okay, moving on, mandatory notifications. Any member employee who is party is party to or becomes aware of any of the following incidents shall notify the ID commander via phone and email within 72 hours. By the way, I changed it to phone and email as opposed to writing a memorandum. Okay. Lawsuits, except when the city is also named as a party we talked about last week, arrest, and I did now put the definition we'll soon get to because that was a question last week. I don't know why it says that. California. Driver's license suspension. I'll just put CDL. Suspension or revocation or notification of suspension or revocation cited in lieu of arrest, excluding vehicle code infractions, service of a civil or administrative process related to their employment or containing allegations that rise to the level of a manual rules violation, or becoming aware of being under investigation for any misdemeanor or felony in this or another jurisdiction. If circumstances prevent timely notification, such as incarceration, hospitalization, out of the country, etc., the member employee shall notify their unit commander, who shall ensure the required report is submitted. So the requirements include the date and time, location of the incident, involved party, and the summary of the circumstances. I'm not too keen on this one just because of Deacon Lyles. I think our conversation last week was spot on about how if we're going to ask them to write a summary, they can impeach themselves.
Right.
So it really needs to be even more basic than that. So I'm still working on the summary of circumstances and what that really means.
Well, why can't it, the things that it seems that needs to be known is what the location of the incident,
Yeah.
was the police involved, and were you incarcerated, were you arrested, and they don't have to go into the details of you know who shot John or who got out the car and what time you arrived and all that. But just those, that's how you can start your investigation right there. The location, where it occurred, or the agencies involved, where you arrested, and the date and time of the incident.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that sounds good to me. Get rid of this. Okay. Phone and email notifications are the only acceptable methods. Failure to comply with this requirement may result in disciplinary action. Like a lot of people might ask why phone and email. I'm a big email fan just for digital documentation for many reasons. I would assume that most people have that availability to do that. As opposed to when this was written 10, 15 years ago, shouldn't be a problem. But everyone seems to understand this. And usually phone, like when I was the watch commander, I got these calls, I wouldn't say often, but I did get them. And it just showed that, people were aware. So go on here to talk about
before you go back to what we were talking about just before. Now, right, the second bullet, involved parties, agency affecting the arrest. Like you said last week, they're not always arrested.
That's right.
So why don't we say involved parties, agency of jurisdiction, or agency that has jurisdiction. And then the second question on there, were you arrested?
Yeah.
So if they were not arrested, that's fine. He didn't arrest me. He just cited me and let me go. Or he said, I'm letting you go in lieu of an arrest. We need further investigation. But at least you know the agency that's involved and you can start your investigation from there.
Okay. I'll clean that up. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. Because not all these, it has to fit within one of these. Arrest is one of them. But if, let's say I'm at home and I just received a lawsuit, I'm technically within that time frame supposed to pick up the phone and make a notification.
Yeah.
So I'll clean it up to where it involves all these. Okay.
Okay. I'm done.
Another question there? You're on mute.
I have a question. And good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
If, let's see, failure to comply with this requirement may result in disciplinary action, is there a provision in here that addresses that failure to comply with the requirement?
Well, this is the actual manual of rules, and I might actually take it out just because it's I mean it's assumed.
I don't want to make any assumptions.
No, I mean I'm saying this is the disciplinary, so it's not if discipline will be imposed. It's
If you fail to, and then there's a provision that says failure to report,
right.
first offense, second offense, third offense.
Yeah. So
And
the
that's
first,
here. Okay.
yeah, is C to T, which is counseling and training determination. Second offense is
Okay.
15-day suspension determination and termination.
Okay. So that's one thing. And then the second thing, you had CDL, and it should be written, and I put it in the chat. It should read California driver's license and then paren CDL.
Right. Yeah. Got it. Yeah. Some people question why that's in there. It's just we can't do our jobs without a CDL for many reasons, and plus it implies, we talked about this last week, it implies other things. So if my license not expired, suspension or revoked, sometimes there's something more serious going on behind the scenes as to why that happened.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
No question.
Okay, moving on. Fix that. Let me just, sorry, I need to highlight this so I remember to come back to it. Okay. Okay, so last week we talked about, and so I'll just go back up here just to highlight it. Cited in lieu of arrest, and you know, this is a weird transition. So in the academy, we mandated that all the recruits, if they had any police contact in a negative way, as in you get pulled over, you need to notify the training staff. So if you got a parking citation, you need to notify the training staff. That changes after one graduates, and they fall under this policy. So we want to stop short of just the general like contact, you know, for a vehicle code violation or parking violation. Even a mere detention could mean a lot of things, and that doesn't require a response, but it's basically where you could have been arrested, but the officer chose not to for a different reason. So we wanted it to fall under this, where it falls under the definition of arrest under California law. So this is PCA 34, the taking of a person into custody in a case and in the manner authorized by law. An arrest may be made by a peace officer or by a private person. An arrest occurs when a person is physically restrained or submits to authority. A police officer uses words or action that indicate intent to arrest, or the suspect reasonably believes they are not free to leave. Should be and there, just because we want it more than just a detention. So I mean, I will tell people when I train this, as in like when in doubt, it's best to make the notification versus trying to figure out later. But at the same time, it's just because you talk to a police officer doesn't mean you have to call someone and make that notification.
So the clear demarcation is arrest versus detention.
That's right. However, I will bring you back up to this. Become aware of being under investigation for any misdemeanor or felony in this or another jurisdiction. So it could be both, or it could be mutually exclusive, where I'm not arrested, I'm not detained, but I am being investigated. I still need to make that notification.
Is there any circumstance under which you would make a notification if you are simply detained?
Not into this section, no.
Okay. Under any other section?
No.
Okay. I just want to understand.
I mean, we can, I mean, I guess maybe, let's say I'm go back to, I'm drunk in public, which is technically a misdemeanor in California. It's one of the oldest laws actually written. The officer detains me, but then, just says, hey, and then, I'm giving you to a friend to drive you home.
Yeah.
One can argue that maybe that brought disrepute to the department, because if they find out I'm from Oakland, or just general conduct, so it could have some bleed over to another manual of rules, but this is just straight for an officer or member's responsibility for reporting misconduct.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I will make these corrections. Any questions on this? So again, we combined two sections. We found last week that they really said the same thing, and it caused confusion. And I'll tell you what gets people today. The notification in our current policy requires a phone call and or written communication, which includes a memorandum. And people weren't doing that. And it's like, what do you mean write a memorandum? But I called the watch commander and they documented that everything was fine. So just fixing that and just making it more, I guess, 2025-ish versus 2010 when this was written and cell phones weren't as popular
Smart.
as now. Yeah.
Yeah, we had quite a lengthy discussion about this last week, and I think this is definitely a lot more clear than having kind of these two kind of conflicting policies or additional layers. So yeah, thanks. Appreciate this one.
Great. All right. I will show you next week the results of that. Let me collapse that. Let's go to the new one, 314. I'll copy and paste this and make it bigger so everyone can see it. Okay, so for those who couldn't join us, basically, and we can rehash this conversation. I think this is I would say a big one. So there's two different arguments here. If you go to, let me go to our. We do not have a standalone section for Miranda violations or the Sixth Amendment, mind you. So this is after charging. So what we have done over the years is that we have put it in this section, which is 314.39, performance of duty. We talked about this slightly before in different meetings, but there's some heavy ones here, like planning of evidence. There's no discipline matrix for that. You're going to get terminated if found to. Okay. But then we have this unintentional or improper search or seizure arrest where it's like the officer didn't intend to do something that violates this, but they did something procedurally wrong. What you don't see here is anything under the Fifth or Sixth Amendment. So the idea is to create a standalone section for that, because it is. Not often we violate it, but we're Mirandizing people constantly, and it should have its own definition and discipline matrix considerations. Ms. Leonard, go ahead.
I'm just questioning the language that you have highlighted. What would be an unintentional search, seizure, or
Not hearing her.
Oh. Can you hear me now?
It's very faint like it was before.
All righty, let me go to my phone.
How about this?
Yeah.
Much, much, much better.
Okay, so
I'm
I'm curious about an unintentional
search,
search, seizure, or
under the language
you have highlighted.
Yeah.
How could that be unintentional?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I used to teach this in the academy, and it is still to this day. Maybe it's a statement about me and my teaching abilities, but it's failed a lot. It's a highly failed objective in the academy, and maybe doing it so many years, I would say it's not very complicated, but for the new officer recruiting the academy, it is quite complicated to understand the difference between, let's say, a cursory search of a person where you're just searching the outer clothing versus a full body search of the person where you're reaching into one's pocket. So often I would see the officer who's fresh out of the academy who is supposed to do a cursory search of the person, but instead they reach into the person's pocket. Okay. You know, they like, hey, listen, I honestly thought it was a legal search. My intentions were not nefarious. There was no negative outcome, as in I didn't recover anything that would be suppressed. It was just a procedural, like, you need to have a better understanding of the law. That would be the unintentional version of that sustained finding.
Okay, thank you. So that would apply to a new officer. I can't imagine that an officer that has been on the force for many years would say, I unintentionally searched someone.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I most common see it with the newer officers. We do get some officers who are just, you know, they get lazy with the law on reading and understanding, or they're just moving too fast and they end up, let's say, searching a trunk of a car when there is no probable cause to search the trunk of the car. And, you know, there is the main argument there is whether it was intentional versus not intentional. It's not an argument of whether the search was lawful or not. We've already established that. But more often than not, I don't see officers going out there and saying, I am going to violate this person's rights by doing a search. Typically, it's ignorance or, you know, just they're moving too fast and not thinking through the process.
Except the officers that were involved in the Oakland Riders case.
Yeah, that's thank you. They're pernicious. I don't think that, you know, that it's 40% or 20% or even 15% of the officers, but that officer that this piece of legislation is aimed at does exist.
Sure.
And exists everywhere in law enforcement. So it seems like we are ignoring the fact that they do exist. So I think an improper search ought to be just that, an improper search. Whether it's unintentional or not doesn't change the fact if it was an improper search. And then the discipline is where you get the amelioration.
Mm-hmm.
But if we start off by saying unintentional, then everybody can go and say it's unintentional.
I think
I don't trust that.
unintentional is the wrong word.
We can't hear you again.
Oh, is the wrong word. Because if you search someone, that's an intentional act. It's not an unintentional act. So maybe that word could be, you know, replaced with something else. I don't know what at this point, but it just seems strange to me that any search would be considered to be unintentional, or any seizure would be unintentional. There's an intent to do it. That's why you did it.
I think it's either improper or proper. That's it. And then when you go through the process, this is the first time he's ever done it. He's a rookie officer. He didn't know any better, blah, 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 blah. Then in the discipline portion or the training portion, that's where the amelioration comes in. That's where the understanding and compassion comes in, and you didn't mean to do it. Okay, fine. But I think it's either improper or a proper search. If it's an improper search, then I want to know the details of it. If it was a mistake, okay, say it's a mistake. And we look in your background and you haven't ever made this mistake ever again. And, it makes sense, whatever your excuse was, it's plausible. Okay. You get counseling or whatever.
Because it seems like we're proffering the excuse when we say it's unintentional.
Yeah. I don't want to write that in the law, in the legislation. No.
What's that?
I don't want to put unintentional there because everybody would go to there. Everybody would claim it's unintentional.
Yeah. So we don't want to proffer their excuse, but unless we have proper versus it, what is a proper search? It is spelled out somewhere. They know it. It's trained into them.
Yeah, it
What
is.
is it?
Well, I mean, it's not just the legal parameters, it's also policy, as in, let's say I don't put them in the right position to conduct a search. So it's more of a technique argument versus a legal argument.
Mhm.
So yeah, then, so let's say that someone said, hey, the officer twisted me the wrong way. And so we look at the body worn camera, we have our arrest and control staff who say, yeah, that's not what we teach in the academy. We teach you to do X, Y, and Z. Then we would sustain for this section also.
So that's the proper, where when you say unintentional, or that is the defense.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's
And-
why we don't want to proffer the rule as the defense. They have to come up with a defense. So maybe proper versus improper is the more appropriate adjective.
Okay.
And Captain, for this 31439, the performance of duty, there's a class 2 consideration for this. MOR violation or no?
So this is somewhat of one of those catch-all manual of rules. So for this, it is a class 2, but for this is a class 1. So it's somewhat hidden in this very broad performance of duty.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But then by removing unintentional, we just kept it as simple. You either did it proper or not. It could still, that wouldn't change the class 2 nature of that.
Well, if you're saying it's not proper, so this is somewhat in line with the whole, like, are we going to make a technical violation versus you straight did an illegal search? Because the one above it is the class 1 severe discipline. It's the intentional illegal search, seizure, or arrest. So then we're arguing over whether the officer knew it was illegal and did it anyway versus, oh, it was my mistake, I'm brand new.
Right, but
Yes.
my point is unintentional is the wrong word, because if you search someone, if you seize their property or you arrest them, that's not an unintentional act. It's an intentional act. Now, whether it was proper act or improper act is the question, but it definitely was not unintentional. That's why I have a problem with that language, and I believe it should be stricken.
Yeah. I mean, we could talk about, we can pause here just because this is in our current manual of rules.
Well, these are the areas why we exist, why we're doing what we're doing right now,
Mhm.
because of this kind of thing. And it's obvious to me that the culture of the agency thinks that an unintentional improper search is something that ought to be, well, while not tolerated, understood, and accepted. When I don't know that other agencies think like that. I mean,
It's an out. Yeah, it's an out.
If you dirty search somebody, you dirty searched them. If you did it, if you stuck your hand in the pocket and said, "Oh, I didn't mean to," well, it doesn't matter what you meant to do. Your hand didn't belong in his pocket. Well, I accidentally somehow my hand slipped in this pocket. Well, that's immaterial. You had no reason to have your hand in his pocket, period. You don't have a right to, you have to pat him down first. So that is bending the law, which is why we're here now. This is the very thing we're trying to get at. This is the subtle thing that should not be in black and white in the rules and regulations.
Mm-hmm.
Considering all that OPD has gone through, and that no one even defends. So if we're going to get out of that kind of historical malaise swamp, we gotta say, no, there's no such thing as an unintentional improper search. It's an oxymoron.
You seem to be troubled by, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but are you, Officer Hubbard, are you concerned about removing this language? It seems
No.
like you're uncomfortable. Oh, okay. I was reading your face and you look like you were uncomfortable.
No,
And-
I'm trying to write it in my head without actually writing it. So I'm in deep thought over like how that can be.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, because there is also good faith. I was thinking of good faith where let's say that a person flags me down and says, hey, that person just assaulted me, and we detain that person. So we seize them. But then the person then says, oh, it's not that person, I meant the other person. So, but that argument would be more exoneration towards the officer because they operate in good faith. It's not improper.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I was thinking through that.
Right, but in the final analysis, it's still an intentional act. Whether someone misidentifies someone, the mere fact that you did what you did is an intentional act. I
Yeah.
just don't see any circumstance where the word unintentional would arise. If you search someone, you searched them. You meant to do it. If you seize their property, you meant to do it. If you arrested them, you meant to do it. There was nothing unintentional about that. So maybe we just need to substitute another word.
No, we
Just take it out altogether.
yes. This is the reason why we're here.
Yeah.
You
If we
know,
take it
because-
out, can I ask a question? If we take it out all together and just leave like improper search, what's the difference between the improper search and the intentional illegal search? Like there's a reason why they've made 2 bullet points for that. And I'm trying to just wrap my mind around what the intent of that is, other than either just to create an out or if we just find another word for intentional that better describes this more procedural thing that's not this intentional illegal more class 1, because you're telling me the top bullet point is a class 1, the bottom one is a class 2. So there was an attempt to distinguish between the different types of violations, whether it's improper search or intentional illegal search.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think of the examples of what distinguishes one versus the other.
Great question.
I mean, really, I think it comes down to this word actually. This is saying intentional. This one is non-intentional. I mean, those are the 2 common denominators here. But I understand it because I mean, I don't think anyone's going to readily admit that they intentionally did something.
I either you illegally searched someone or you didn't. And it's black and white. There's no gray area in a search and seizure.
Well, and it's not just search, it's also an unintentional seizure or an unintentional arrest, right? So we're getting hung up on just the search part of it, but it's all 3 of those that's unintentional. I'm also trying to think, how do you, I could see maybe an unintentional seizure. How do you do an unintentional arrest?
I mean, an officer can believe that they have enough probable cause when there's a
and
district
does not.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
I
happens
mean,
all the time.
yeah, right. And there's we have, let's say for a felony, a sergeant has to come to the scene and approve the arrest. And
Mhm.
I've done this. They come there and like, yeah, your probable cause is just not there, so release the person. But
Exactly.
the arrest already made, so the violation occurred.
So somebody could file a complaint that they were wrongfully arrested at that point.
You're right. And we did talk about this section because this is, as you know, a very high flying section that's used because everyone who's arrested will make this complaint. And we get a lot of domestic violence type allegations regarding this because our other policy is very strict. It was like you have to arrest the dominant aggressor, period. And there's no exception to that. So even if the officer kind of disagrees, like, doesn't matter. So the officer will get a complaint for this very section.
I'm not
But in that case,
convinced. I'm sorry, but I'm not convinced. Maybe intentional in the first one needs to be stricken too. Then it's the illegal search, seizure, or arrest.
You want to keep
And
that there.
and what is the difference between that and improper? Isn't illegal and improper this? No, maybe they're not the same thing. Because
no.
Well, look,
I say strike those two, intentional and unintentional. It's an illegal search or seizure and arrest,
that's right.
and it's an improper search, seizure, or arrest. So illegal means it's against the law, and improper means what under these circumstances?
To me, I read it as more procedural, Like if you're reviewing body cam footage and you see something where you're like, oh, that was a bad technique. He shouldn't have done that. Or somebody files a
Oh, I see.
complaint
Okay.
because maybe I'm trying to get more clarity as well, just in terms of examples of like the difference between these two. Only, I mean,
Right.
and I know we talked, and the thing is, I'm also trying to remember the conversation that we actually talked about this section in the past, I think quite some time ago. But I think where we land on, and at least I will keep on landing on, is the more I have class 2 considerations when it comes to the disciplinary process, the more flexibility I'll have, because I've now found myself in there's something that where we find ourselves and we're looking at certain things in body cam footage, or if there's a certain complaint, we're seeing it, right? And technically there's like a technical violation, right? But it was done without malice. You could tell it's just somebody's just learning, right? It's a coaching opportunity. And if I don't have in the disciplinary process, we don't have that class 2 consideration to be able to have that proper level of discipline and then correct that, behavior and then coach that up. If it just becomes a level 1 and that's all we have to work with, then it feels like the where we really want to change malicious behavior and really bring the hammer down. It's hard to distinguish between that and when somebody is just making a procedural mistake and could learn from it and basically not take them off the streets for 3-4 days just for like a hiccup that maybe nobody even caught, except for maybe Hubbard's going through body cam footage and happens to see it and is like, well, I technically have to call this out because I saw it now. And it was so under the radar that nobody saw it because it was such a small violation. Maybe the way somebody got twisted, or I don't know.
Well,
I know one that
you're not going to change the culture of Oakland Police Department by thinking like that. By finding ways to make the officer unintentionally not responsible for an illegal or improper act. You know, either they did it or they didn't. Now, if it means that Oakland, we need to look at the disciplinary process in terms of the broad scope of how we meet our discipline, maybe we should look at that. But we can't have in the rules and regulations that, look, if you illegally search someone, maybe we can make this unintentional. Maybe if you say the right things, it can be unintentional and we can make it a level 2. That's not why we're here.
Can I say
that's not why why we're here with OPD and this whole thing, this whole situation we're in is because of thinking like this. And so if you're a product of OPD, this makes sense because you came up in it and this is how you were trained. But I wasn't trained like this, and it's like it's like somebody scratching their fingernails on a chalkboard. I mean, wait a minute, you put your hands in somebody's pocket, you took all their stuff out, or at noontime you pull down their pants and searched them. All of this stuff has happened. All of this has happened in the last 4 or 5 years here in Oakland. So we got to change this. We have to change this culture. I can see where someone can make an arrest when they thought they had probable cause because, that could be gray. And if somebody comes and says, unarrest them, that's why you have 849B. You can unarrest a person. You can actually do that. That's part of the standing law. But you're searching somebody, you're dirty searching them. You got a habit of doing that. And hey, these people, street people, won't make complaints against you, or who they gonna believe, you or them? And so they dirty searching people all the time. Well, they shouldn't be doing it. And it shouldn't be in the written manual of rules where some defense attorney can look at that and say, well, look, here, this is improper.
Can I say something?
I don't think Oakland helps itself thinking like this.
So you have on the first bullet, intentional illegal search, and then you have at the second bullet, unintentional or improper search. Both of them being
Both of
violations.
them want to go. Yeah.
But unintentional is the defense that is given to the intentional. So I think that's why this is confusing, at least to me. I wouldn't, again, proffer the defense as a violation, the unintentional. In other words, if I'm accused of intentionally illegal search, my defense is it was unintentional. And I think that's why the number, I have a problem with bullet 2, first word, but not the other part, improper search. Because apparently, Captain, there's a difference between an improper search and an intentional illegal search. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Then I would say take out the unintentional in bullet 2. Because that's somebody's defense.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering why we have to have intentional. The search is illegal.
It's illegal. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna jump back in. My hand's been up for a while. So I now understand that the first one is a class 1 and the second one is a class 2, and that certainly makes sense to me. I agree with that. But I'm still stuck on intentional and unintentional. If you even in bullet point number 1, if you conduct an illegal search, seizure, or arrest, that's an intentional act. And again, that's that raises a defense. They'll say, oh, you know, it might have been illegal, but it was unintentional.
Well, that would be the defense. That's
That
why I'm
would be,
saying.
yeah.
No, that's exactly
I
what
totally agree with the word
exactly what I'm
unintentional.
saying.
Yeah, that's
So
why
I'm saying,
unintentional
hold
shouldn't
on,
be-
Marsha. Hold on, Marsha. I have the floor now. I have the floor now. What I'm saying is that intentional and unintentional, both of those words should be stricken,
I agree.
because even if the search is illegal, it's still an intentional act. All these acts are intentional, whether it's a class 1 or a class 2 violation.
Yeah,
They're both intentional acts. So I would strike both of those words, and I very strongly about that. I might say. Thank you.
yeah.
And I think I agree with you. The first bullet should just say illegal search, seizure, or
Exactly.
arrest. And the second bullet should say improper search, seizure, or arrest. But to put the defense and the accusation or the defense in there as descriptors, I think it's wrong. Yeah. I don't disagree with you, Kathy.
I don't either.
How do you all feel about creating a standalone section for this? The problem is we're arguing over a word, which is understandable, I think, between all of us, but I'm trying to think of the person who's now reading this, and they're not going to know this conversation. So if I can remove it from performance of duty and actually make maybe performance of duty / arrest, and have actually, as you see here, a narrative that goes with it, that then defines what this is.
Performance of duty is the catch-all, and these are the violations that you've described. That's why, whether or not it's intentional or unintentional, it's an illegal search or it's an improper search, etc.
Right. So what's improper is more what I'm speaking of. Like, okay, who defines that?
I think that needs to be apparent here in some explaining some descriptors of what is an improper search, seizure, or an arrest. I think every officer ought to know what an illegal search and seizure and arrest is. I don't think we have to say another word about that. Although if they don't know that, they ought not be sworn police officers work in the state of California. So, but what is an improper search? What do you mean by improper search? And that's where the definition comes in. And that's where, what is an improper seizure? What is an improper arrest? I can see, I can accept your explanation about an arrest. The officer thinks he has probable cause. Sergeant comes down and says, no, you don't. Okay, that happens all the time. You know, you're a little zealous. You don't know the law well enough. You're making a mistake here. 849B that man. And, you know, and that's it. But what is an improper search? And we ought to give some examples of that.
I agree.
What is a, and I really don't, seizing something is improperly, what does that mean? You're taking something from someone and you bringing it into the station and booking it into the property room. Okay, you're seizing that. How can you do that improperly? If you don't have a search warrant. If you don't have a search warrant, you're looking at something that's contraband or whatever, and you don't need a search warrant. But an illegal seizure is you know, pushing your way into somebody's house and you know, without a warrant. They told you not to come in, and then you see something, and you see something, some contraband in the house, and then you seize it. That's an illegal seizure. Or you knock on the door and a person opens the door and you stick your foot in their door. You force your way in, no warrant. Then you see something that's illegal contraband, and then you seize that. That's illegal. So we ought to know what illegal is. I just don't understand the improper part.
Yeah, illegal though is debatable too, just because, like, is it illegal in the court of law or just Brian Hubbard's opinion as he's reviewing the case? So I mean, I have to elaborate on what that actually means.
I think I would assume it's illegal.
I guess what I'm saying,
law.
I don't know that seizure ought to even be here.
Oh.
In terms of improper seizing something.
I mean, detentions, right? If I unlawfully detain someone, that's not an arrest or a search.
That's, if you say it again.
If I detain someone, let's say I pull someone over because for what I suspect is like a broken taillight. I know that's cliche, and then I stop them, and then it turns out their taillight is not broken. That's a detention. It's a seizure. But I let them go. Let's say it's like 30 seconds, but still it's a seizure.
Well,
How could it be a seizure
I don't think
if their tail light is broken? I wouldn't see that as a seizure. I would see that as your tail light was broken and I had a right to pull you over. I had probable cause to pull you over. Nobody can argue that.
No, I know, but I'm saying, like, let's say their tail light is not broken. Let's say it's just like I pull them over because I think that is. So we're arguing over whether the person sees. The person submitted to my authority. That's a seizure. So that's why it's important for it to be here.
Okay. We have some terms here that maybe well. Yeah. Okay, I understand what an arrest is.
Mm-hmm.
I understand what a seizure is.
Yeah.
And I understand what a detention is.
That's right.
And they're not all the same. They're distinctively different. You can't say a seizure is an arrest. Yeah, well, I got his body. That is an arrest. We're talking about seizing. When you seize somebody in the law, we're talking about property. We're talking about contraband. That's what we're talking about. So we can't make these terms meld in and out of one another. That's not how I understood. If I seize somebody, if I detain them, that's a detention. It's not an arrest. If I arrest somebody, that's more than a detention. But if I seize their property, if I seize their wallet, if I take their car, that's a seizure.
Right.
That's not an arrest. You don't arrest a car. You
That's
don't
right.
arrest someone's money or their wallets or their wallet or their jewelry. That's a seizure. So
Right.
when I see seizure, I'm not thinking about taking somebody's body.
I mean, yeah. I mean, the reasonable suspicion definition is a temporary seizure of a person. So we're talking about the same thing. It's just, it's a detention.
Okay.
But that would be a detention, not a seizure of someone's body. Because seizure relates to property and detention relates to the person's body, is my understanding of criminal law.
That's my understanding too.
The legal definition of a detention is the temporary seizure of a person. So that's where the seizure comes in.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, to me, it's like, I mean, we're saying the same. I mean, we can put in there detention, or we can say explicitly the seizure of property, even if it's temporary. It's the temporary or permanent deprivation of that item from that person.
What do you think their intent was? Did you think the intent was to have seizure and arrest and they mean the same thing? No, they wanted three different things: search, seizure, and arrest. Three different distinctive entities. Now, you're right. If someone is taken into custody, you're seizing their body. Okay, so that is true.
Yeah.
But in this particular thing, in this particular section, they had to meant searching for property or contraband, searching for illegal activity, seizing it once you find it, and arresting the individual for violating or possessing something that is illegal, violating the law, possessing something that is illegal. So they're not all three the same thing. So the intent here, you tell me, isn't the intent here to mean to seize property? And if it is property, then we ought to say seizure of property. Because I've never heard it described like that. If you've taken somebody's body in, you're arresting them. You're taking them into custody.
So maybe we should put the word detention in. I'm playing the devil's advocate here. So should detention be included in this section?
Sure.
Well,
I mean, yeah, we can. I mean, as long as I've known this, I've always, the seizure and detention are interchangeable to me. If you illegally detain someone, to me, it falls within their seizure because you're seizing them temporarily. But I can put in their detention. It's fine by me. I don't.
Well, then you ought to say seizure of property.
Yeah.
Because if you think if the OPD officers think that seizure is just taking of someone's body, then what does the taking of property, what is that described as?
It's both. I mean,
probably
I'm just
going to
saying,
be
like,
both.
yeah,
They're probably going to say it's both.
Yeah.
Well, there's the confusion.
Well, that's why I was saying if you add the word detention, that would refer to the body, and seizure would refer to property. But you could say seizure of property.
Yes. Let's be clear. My assumption was seizure was always property.
No, if it's confusing to us as a group, then I definitely will change it. I'm just saying we never had this argument before. I've never internally had an argument or someone win an argument by saying, well, it says seizure, that only means property. We know that to be detention and or the seizure of property. So, but it's fine. I mean, I want it to be clear to everyone, and I'm glad you're putting fresh eyes on it. So I have no problem adding additional language so it's clear to everyone. It's not a problem. I mean, the learning domain, and this is where I think it comes from. So the California Post learning domain, LD15 is laws of arrest only, even though within the document, it talks about consensual encounters and detentions of persons and property. But then LD16 is search and seizure law. And it covers everything, including arrest. So it's interchangeable in our world. But I never looked at this as being confusing to anyone looking at it as in like, well, if I illegally detain someone, it doesn't say detention. No, we know what that means. It's a seizure. It's a seizure of a person. Yeah. but I got it. It's fine. I mean, I want to make it clear, and even defining what that actually means, because I also want to make it clear to people that the time doesn't matter. So permanently depriving someone of their property is not the only thing that we're talking about. It's even the temporary seizure of property that can get you in trouble in this section.
So are we making changes directly on the document, or we're just making a note to
Yeah.
do that later?
Yeah, this is a PDF, so I'm just making notes to myself on my other screen here that you can't see.
Okay.
Yeah.
All righty. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm still a little confused where that lands us in regards to the improper, illegal, if there's even examples of unintentional searches, seizures, or arrests, and if not, we should remove that word completely. I just, I'm as hard as it is for folks, and I find myself having a hard time arguing for this, right? Because I know it's like a slippery slope, right? When you start using words like unintentional, but I've seen body cam where an officer actually does a technical violation, and it's very clear that it was accidental and not intentional and not without any malice. And if there's not a class 2 violation to be able to defer to in the disciplinary process, it makes it really hard to properly, give it a fair
Right.
consequence.
Right. So we're not saying get rid of class 2. We're just saying strike the word unintentional. So in your instance, it would be an improper search.
And then, yeah, so then I guess so that where we left off was, does by striking intentional and unintentional and just leave it as illegal search or improper search, is that enough to distinguish the two between those two?
With the
I think
definition.
so, because I don't, maybe I'm wrong, correct me. It seems like an illegal search is something that you did that's clearly against the law. An improper may be the way you went about doing it, and it may not necessarily be illegal, but it was wrong.
That's how I take it.
Yeah. Is that how you would understand that, Captain Hubbard?
Yeah, and I don't want to make it more complicated. That is my understanding. I would say that there's definitely different levels of intrusion with these types of Fourth Amendment issues. Like searching one's pocket is far less intrusive than searching one's home. So I don't want to put those equal weight. Well, like if you're illegally searching one's home versus improperly searching one's pockets, I can see the argument there. So it's scalable, but it's also a question of like who determines it to be illegal. We as the Oakland Police Department can say you searching that person's pockets where it was improper. The court of law had no problem with what happened, and they didn't suppress any evidence, nothing like that. So there's a lot more substance that can go in it, but I do agree at keeping it class 1, class 2, and then I'm just going to strike intentional and unintentional, and then offer a definition for all of them.
Well, listen, Oakland and Oakland Police Department can have a more stricter rules and regulations governing their officers than the court of law.
Yeah.
The officers are not working for the state of California. They're working for the city of Oakland. And Oakland can say, even though the state of California says this is not a big deal, it's a big deal to us.
Right.
And so I don't accept that as a way of justifying, we don't know what we ought to know. And then who is the arbiter on that? The chief of police is the final arbiter on what he wants his officers to do in terms of what is proper and improper, and what is something may be not necessarily illegal, or it may be legal to do it, but it's rude and it's embarrassing and it causes a bad relationship with the community. So we don't want you to do it. So it's improper. So Oakland can be more strict, and quite frankly, Oakland should be more strict. That's why we're here.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I don't have to remind you guys of that over and over, but that's why we're here. It ain't because Oakland has never gotten any problems before with bad arrests and bad searches. So I don't even know why we have to have a class 2 on something like this. Why? Look, I want you guys to do proper arrests. Well, they double check that because they have a sergeant come out and okays the arrest. So, okay, well, why are you having a sergeant doing that? Because there's been a history of bad arrests. So I'm saying that I don't think it should be a class 2. You look, if you are improperly searching people and you are seizing things improperly, why are you doing that? Now, if this is the first time you did it, then we ought to take that into consideration. But it's a class 1 violation. What you did was wrong, and what you did was illegal. So why do we need to make it 2? Why do we need to make it? Well, he really did intend it. How do you know what the person intended? I submit to you, you don't know. And that's why the judge, wrote what he wrote. That, the department bends over backwards to find ways to make these, not hold people accountable. I don't get it. Either you do a proper search, seizure, and arrest, or you don't. And if you do something that's illegal, that's a class 1. Now, why is it a class 2 if I improperly arrested somebody and used a bad technique or whatever? Well, it's a class 1, but this is the first time you ever did it. So no, I'm not giving you 30 days off. We ought to have some kind of discretion in there. Why do we need to make it a 2? I think when you make it a 2, it increases places where people can argue that this is where they need to be, class 2. And you're not holding anybody accountable.
Well, I can't argue with that, Reginald. I think I have to go along with that. And then when the officer is disciplined, he can make his arguments as to whether, whatever his defense is, he can offer them at that time.
And then when he goes into a
But I
skelly
think
hearing.
I think it's a way of letting officers know that we're serious about changing the culture of this department. And if you have a valid reason for doing what you did, that'll be a mitigating circumstance. But other than that, we've got to hold you accountable. And I think officers will begin to realize that, look, the culture is changing within this department, and I need to get in line or maybe leave this job.
And then OPD officers, excuse me, not OPD, but police officers, they have a skelly hearing. They have a chance to come in and say, look, it was dangerous out there. There was gunshots going, and I want to make sure he didn't have a gun. And so I stuck my hand in his pocket. I probably shouldn't have did it, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Then at that point, the chief of police or whoever does a skelly can give him the amelioration.
Okay.
Why are we making it 2? Why are we doing that? Why is that necessary?
I think we've gone full circle now. We've reached agreement that unintentional or intentional are the allegations of violations is the intentional, and the unintentional is the defense. And we shouldn't have that in there, and we should take it out.
Yeah, Captain Hubbard agreed that he would remove those 2 words.
Yeah. So good.
Yeah, but see, I'm not getting,
I see what you're saying, Reginald. You're saying strike the second bullet point altogether. And
we ought not be trying
under the first one.
I think the proffer that Marsha is speaking of is why this argument for a class 2. Why are we arguing for all these class 2s? Why is that important?
Yeah. Why?
Well, I mean, class ones carry a significant weight of discipline, and like to the chair's point of we want to correct behavior, but you know, if everything's a class one, it carries significant discipline. So that's all, and it's also remember what we talked about, like class ones are an automatic investigation versus let's say a sergeant is reviewing body worn camera, he or she doesn't like really what the officer did, without a class two in there, they can't mentor train. It's an automatic investigation. So
But an
that's
automatic investigation, does that mean it's 2 weeks and all of that investigation?
it's months, 6 months to a year.
Oh,
Well, I tell you, that'll certainly make an officer think twice about whether they're going to do something illegal or improper. If they know that they're going to have to spend months or years trying to get this whole thing worked out.
this,
I
Okay,
just
so-
I'm too tired, y'all, to have even my mind wrap around being able to articulate this, and I don't by any means want to create any loopholes or any ways for OPD to be able to exploit it or have ways to have plausible deniability and be like, oh, I'm sorry, it was unintentional, right? And I totally 100% agree with everybody saying. I also am struggling with the idea that humans never make unintentional mistakes. And I've seen it in my short time already, certain times in body cam footage already in my short time at the commission, that there's been some mistakes that have clearly were procedural and unintentional without malice. And we had to discipline harder and up because there was no level 2 option on that. And we had to treat it as if it was somebody that was doing something very malicious and in disrepute of the organization. And for us, it's hard to change culture when we're everything. What's that nail that what's that old saying, to a hammer everything's a nail, right? And so that's, I think, what I'm trying to avoid, and it's a delicate balance of being able to have the optionality to be able to do that and distinguish between those two, but walking that very fine line of not creating any outs for OPD to be able to exploit that as a way to continue bad behavior in the culture. So I'm just going trying to wrap my mind around it, and trying to balance that out right now too. And just to be honest with you, I'm a little fried right now in my brain to think about this. Yeah.
Then let me ask for further clarification from the captain. The intent is bullet 1 is an example, may include these violations of performance of duty may include an illegal search, and that's the class 1, or an improper search, and that's the class 2. Is that what this intent of those 2 bullets are?
In our current policy, yes.
Well, then why don't you just instead, again, and I think where we are getting I guess mixed up on, or not mixed up on, or asking for further clarification is, you don't have to characterize it as intentional or unintentional, or even intentional, unintentional. Why don't you just say bullet 1, illegal search, seizure, or arrest, class 1. Bullet 2, improper search, seizure, or arrest, class 2. If that's
And
your
then Captain, yeah, I think that's great. And then Captain also offered to add it, separate, pull it out, and add a little more paragraph narrative explaining more the nuance of that, since people aren't privy to this conversation. That's what I got from that too, right?
Yeah, see, because again, bullet 1 is the more serious one. That would be the allegation that the department would allege against the officer. Bullet 2, the class 2, is an improper search. Also, what the department would allege against the officer. The officer's defense would be it was a proper search, and they would say, "Look, this is how it was done. This was according to how I was trained." bullet 1, a legal search. No, under the Constitution, what is it? The search and seizure, you should be free against illegal
okay.
searches and seizures of person, places, and things.
Yeah.
They get into that in the arbitration, in both of these. If there's an arbitration for bullet 1 or arbitration related to bullet 2, allegations are made at the department level, defenses are made at the officer level, whether it was intentional or not intentional, or whether it was proper or was not proper. So I think that's why I continue to be asking, or continue to ask, that you delete what the defenses and the allegations would be, instead of just saying the noun is, it's an illegal search. The search was illegal, and the search was improper. And I think if you just make it clear, the bullet 1 is the class 1 and the bullet 2 is the class 2, and give it a little bit more, like Chair said, in terms of definition and clarification, we can move on. See, because look at bullet 3. You don't say intentional or unintentional planting of evidence, or bullet 4, intentional or unintentional failure to perform duties.
Great point. Yeah.
See, you're proffering the defenses and the affirmative allegations in these first 2 bullets for some reason, where in the others you don't do that.
I'll just add this in my last statement on the issue. We can move on. Because of the heaviness or the weight of the investigation, 6 months in a proper one, then we have these class 2s that exist, which implies that citizens of Oakland would be harmed even more. We're not changing the behavior. And that's why we're here, not to make the work lighter on the agency, but change the cultural understanding of what is right and proper in terms of police behavior. I'm done.
But I can understand that a rookie may fall into some improper search technique. And that would be the defense. It was unintentional. That's why I don't want to put the word unintentional in there, because that's going to be the officer's defense. This first one, illegal search, I just think you just roll out the Constitution, or you roll out the state procedure or the Department of Procedure, or how the search is conducted, and then determine whether it was intentional or unintentional. So I think it's just illegal search. And the second bullet is improper search, because there's apparently some differentiation between an improper and an illegal. Maybe improper is procedural, maybe illegal is under state law or a constitutional federal law. I don't know. But again, you don't need that intentional in bullet 1 and unintentional in bullet 2. If you're creating this second, class 2 is the bullet number 2. Because aren't you trying to differentiate between something that's procedural and something that is illegal? It's substantively illegal, and that's what bullet 1 is.
Yeah. I mean, the severity also behind it, but yes.
Well, I'm done with this one. You guys can decide at this point what you want to do.
Yeah, no, I know my charges. Maybe it's easier if I'll work on this, and then we'll come back next week, and I'll take into consideration creating class 1, class 2, but also a standalone class 1 to Deacon Lyle's point, and see what it looks like. And that's why we're here. Yeah. Okay, any questions on that then? Okay, I don't know how far we will get into this, but along the same lines, we do not have Fifth or Sixth Amendment section. It did fall into the previous section we just discussed, even though it not explicitly stated. So I rewrote this to actually have a standalone section. There is not a class 1, class 2 version of this for now. That's to be discussed, but this is just straight Fifth and Sixth Amendment. So obligation to uphold constitutional protections. All members and employees shall uphold and protect the constitutional rights of individuals as guaranteed by the Fifth and Sixth Amendments of the U.S. Constitution. Any violation, intentional or intentional or unintentional undermines the integrity of the department and may result in disciplinary action, civil liability, or criminal prosecution. As I pause there, maybe that's good language to put in the other one, because what I'm saying here is, regardless if it's intentional or unintentional, it could undermine all of this. So maybe I just answered my own question. Members and employees shall not coerce, deny, or otherwise interfere with an individual's right under these amendments. Each member and employee is responsible for the proper exercise of their authority and must not conceal, divert, or mitigate their true culpability in constitutional violations. Fifth Amendment protections. The Fifth Amendment protects individuals from compulsory self-incrimination, being forced to make statements that can be used against them in a criminal case, double jeopardy, being prosecuted twice for the same offense, deprivation of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. I don't know if I'll keep the double jeopardy in there. I don't think it really applies to the police officer level. Fifth Amendment violations include but are not limited to failure to provide Miranda warnings when required, resulting in involuntary and inadmissible confession, compelling a statement under duress, coercion, or threat, physical or psychological, interrogation after an individual has invoked their right to remain silent or requested an attorney, use of deceptive tactics that exceed legal limits to extract confessions, unlawful taking of property without due process. Then we have Sixth Amendment protections, which is right to legal counsel during criminal proceedings, the right to a fair and speedy trial, right to confront witnesses, right to be informed of charges. Again, I might cut that out because that's more of the district attorney's office. Sixth Amendment violations include but are not limited to denying a suspect the right to counsel after they invoke their right to an attorney, interrogating a suspect outside the presence of their attorney when legal representation has been requested, deliberately delaying legal proceedings to hinder an individual's right to a fair trial, failure to notify an individual charged against them in a timely manner, improperly restricting access to an attorney for individuals in custody. And then reporting violations, any member or employee becomes aware of Fifth and Sixth Amendment violation shall report the incident to their supervisor or the Internal Affairs Division within 24 hours or sooner if practical. And that's in our M3 policy. A lot going on with the Sixth Amendment here, which I don't think is applicable or can be applicable even if we tried. It's more of the Fifth Amendment where it just needs to be a standalone section in here. And to me, the Fifth Amendment is far easier to understand than the Fourth Amendment because it's custody plus interrogation. If the person's in custody, then you cannot interrogate without first Mirandizing them and seeking a waiver. Similar to there's no interrogation without custody. Still, we get some confusion with this section. So that's why we created the standalone section. Any thoughts on, I know a lot to read there, I'm sorry, but any thoughts on that?
This summary of the amendments?
Well, I put in there just so the person reading it just doesn't say, okay, I can't violate one's Fifth Amendment right. Is I actually put it in there, which is a little bit more than what else is written in the manual of rules, but I just want to be very clear on people on what the standard is on what we can hold them accountable for. It can still be expanded. So a lot of times, and I'll just give you the most common violation. Oh, there's two. So Miranda is not arrest specific. It's
Detain.
I think they're wrong. It's not charging specific, it's arrest specific, as in if let's say I'm arresting them for domestic violence, but I want to ask them about a vandalism case that I'm also working on, I can't ask them vandalism questions because they're already arrested for the domestic violence. So it's once they're arrested, you're done, period. So we see that common violation is like, well, I wasn't asking them about the domestic violence issue. I was asking about this other issue. And they didn't understand the law. The other thing I see is an officer arresting someone after, let's say, a stressful situation like a foot pursuit. The officer's heart rate is at 170, and they say, "Hey, why did you run from me?" That's technically a Miranda violation because you're arresting them and you're asking them an interrogating or incriminating type question. Those are the most common ones that I see. The other one that's somewhat of an outlier, but still exists, where an officer is acting like the person's under arrest by their demeanor, performance, etc., but they're not technically under arrest, but it's in the de facto category. So they put handcuffs on the person. In the officer's mind, okay, they're not under arrest, I'm just detaining them, but they're asking a bunch of questions. One can argue that they're de facto in custody, therefore you should not be interrogating. So I can go on and on about this. This is a very lengthy conversation. Miranda is a very lengthy lesson that I teach in the academy years ago when I used to teach. But I try to keep it somewhat basic here because at the end of the day, it's like if you graduate the academy, you should understand the nuances of it and you just have to be careful.
Amen.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually think that the Fifth Amendment's a little bit, it's a little bit easier just because there's no rush to interrogate. So it's like you shouldn't be getting caught up in this because like there's nothing in policy or the law that says immediately upon arrest that you have to Mirandize someone and launch into an interrogation, and nor should you for many reasons. So that's when it's like you slow down, you understand what's going on, and then when you're ready, you interrogate them after you Mirandize them. I'm sorry, I cut
So
someone.
in your first instance, if a person is Mirandized for a particular crime, does that Miranda warning extend to asking about an unrelated crime? It's across the board. Is that right?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, again, I don't really teach that just because it's like, do you even know what questions to ask? The problem with officers is like launching into a Miranda and interrogation. It's like, do you even know what questions you're going to ask? Like, why do it? Like, you need to be prepared to know what kind of questions you ask. Same thing for like, let's say domestic violence. You arrest the person. It's like, well, what questions are you going to ask without first interviewing the victim to find out what you're investigating? I just never understood why people just jump into it immediately.
And this is one of those ones that I'm having particularly a hard time even thinking about where it could be a procedural misstep or a class 2 violation. I think, if I remember our conversation last week, we kind of kept landing on, I don't know, this seems like we need to be very strict with this being just a class 1 violation. Although this is one that we've been asked to also maybe even consider for class 2. And I'm wondering, like, are there any examples of how this could be something procedural? It just feels very straightforward that they should know. I'm more inclined to consider procedural stuff when there's like something physical happening, right? Like a physical interaction. It feels like all of this is pretty, like you said, they should be trained to know what the rules are around this and not be, it's very black and white to me.
Yeah, sure. The best example I can give you, and this is, I think, what the chief is asking for a class 2, is when the officer asks a question and he or she had no idea they asked it. It's under their stressful situation. Their heart rate is up. They asked a question that was captured on body-worn camera. It was never used against the person. It was never reported. Like, they didn't put in the report, oh, the person confessed to me this. It's just later discovered during a body-worn camera review by a sergeant that says the person was in custody, you asked a question, Miranda violation, period. And then we interview the officers like, I honestly had no idea I asked that question because I was tired. I just chased after this person. There was gunshots, whatever it may be. That's what we experienced. So we call that a Miranda violation. It is what it is. But the chief just wants a little bit more latitude for the times where yeah, it just, there was no intent, I hate to use a word again, but intentionality behind it to actually incriminate that person.
See, again, how many times does that happen in the course of a year?
It happens
We
probably half a
go,
dozen times.
how many?
Oh,
100 times? 200
half-
times?
No, it's not a lot. We just heard a case today, actually. So it does happen.
So 12 times a year.
Sure.
Okay. 12 times a year is not enough to open up the Pandora's box on Miranda. Far too hard for Miranda. And now we're going to lower down the strict guidelines of Miranda, which demands that the officer know that the state demands that the officers understand Miranda, no matter how rigid it is and how difficult and confusing that it can be. The obligation is on the police department to understand Miranda. It's a guard against their bad performance. So we're gonna make it a class, open up class 2 on Miranda, and then folks would say, hey, well, let's make it a class 2. When this chief is gone, the class 2 still exists, and now we're gonna have more class 2s, and we haven't changed the culture of the department at all. We're thinking about this wrong. We're trying to make it easy for who? Well, the one guy who chased somebody and his heart rate was at 170, and he asked the one question that some weeks later a sergeant happened to observe something, and it only happens 12 times a year. Let's don't touch Miranda for 12 times a year. It's too valuable.
Yeah.
I have to agree with that.
Yeah. I think we agreed on that last week, and that's fine. Can you be the one to tell the chief that?
Yeah,
Chief?
yeah, because I'm surprised that he's saying some stuff like that.
Yeah.
I've
Does
been
he
wanting
know-
to
does
meet
he
with him
know-
anyway. I'll tell him.
Does he know he's the chief of what department? Does he know the history of what we're dealing with? Does he know how much civil money that's been paid out because of police misconduct? He's not here to make more holes in our ability to manage this department. He's supposed to govern it.
Yeah. I mean, he's much more articulate than me, so maybe he has a better explanation behind it. So, but I did promise I would ask.
It's not a matter of articulation. It really isn't. It's not it's a matter of principle. This is a principle position. Why either you are violating the Miranda rules or you're not. And if somebody does something unintentional, he has the final word. He has the Skelly. He hasn't lost any power. And if it only happens 12 times a year, why are we to want to open this Pandora box up?
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Any fixes to my definition, anything that confusing there, or maybe I can cut out or expand on?
My only issue is in summarizing, you step into leaving something out, people feeling as though, well, this is all there is. I would somehow say this is a summary, and the full text should be reviewed and consulted. This is meant as a summary.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I agree. I don't want to make this. I mean, this is what, 3 pages, and I don't want that to be. I want it to be clear.
Yeah,
I can say refer to the Constitution if you want the full text of the.
right. Correct.
Yeah, that's fine.
Captain, I'm curious, where does discipline start on the matrix for this one?
Well, Yeah, so this is what's unique about it is we do have a standalone section here, but not necessarily the manual rules, but it's suspension 2 determination, suspension 5 determination, and suspension 10 determination.
Okay. All right.
Okay, yeah, and I'll work on that. So my charge for next week is Fourth Amendment improper proper search, seizure, arrest. Got that. And then 5th and 6th, I'll clean that up.
What,
Uh,
did we look at 6?
Well, yeah, well, the 6 is really the same thing. So I'll, for those who weren't with us last week, this is even more rare because Sixth Amendment is triggered when the person is charged criminally. So where we have seen the mistake here is someone who works in our criminal investigations division who is Brian Hubbard is in jail for, let's say, robbery. Okay. I've been charged for robbery. And now I'm also wanted for murder. Because I'm charged for robbery, the Sixth Amendment is triggered. They cannot now interview me for murder without an attorney present, period. So
Revoke Miranda.
Sixth Amendment, because it's charging. It's the same, but it's different. The reason why I put this in here is because we've had this argument before. I've seen it personally. Well, the discipline matrix doesn't say the Sixth Amendment. This is not a Fifth Amendment issue. This is Sixth Amendment. No, I want to put a Sixth Amendment in there so we can hold people accountable for Sixth Amendment violation. Very rare, but we still get a couple, at least 2 that I can think of. That's why. So I do have a lot to do for next week, and I'm ready to take that on. The last thing, and I don't think we have time to cover it today because we did leave off with gifts and gratuities. I wrote a lot for that, and so if possible, I'd like to hold off until next week because I do value everyone's input on that to where we don't want to encourage obviously gifts and gratuities, but also don't want to take that relationship away with the community. So I have a new definition of that, a little bit nuanced, but I do want to give time people the opportunity to read it and let it sink in and have a discussion.
All right, great. No, this sounds like a good place to pause right here, Captain. Definitely agree. There's definitely some work to do. And I think, in regards to the last discussion that we had for quite some time, I think it will be helpful just to be able to see those options visually and see how those land. So we'll appreciate that. And yeah, I have a feeling that we'll get into quite a conversation as well around the gifts and gratuities. So looking forward to that conversation. Want to open it up. Let me check. I do apologize. I haven't checked the chat in quite some
There's
time.
no one in the there are no community
No participants.
Yes.
Okay. And then nobody commented in the chat or anything. All right, cool. Sounds good. Is there any closing thoughts? Anything folks have burning that they would like Captain to either work on or consider between now and next week? And Captain, I'm sorry, I don't have this in front of you. Remind me, you're going to be out one of these Wednesdays?
The last Wednesday of the month, I'm visiting my
The
son.
25th and 26th, I believe it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's just that
Yes,
one.
the 25th and 26th. So the 26th, you'll
The
be
26th then.
Mhm.
Okay. Right. All right. So then we'll
think
put
the
a pin
last
to remind
Wednesday,
folks.
the last Wednesday, I believe I'm out too, but I'm not sure. I have to check my calendar.
Okay. Well,
But
sounds like
I'd like to thank everyone for the fruitful discussion that we had today. I got a lot of insight from all of you, and I appreciate all of your input. Thank you.
Likewise.
Absolutely. Continues to be a very fruitful space, and hopefully the public, when we post these, can also learn about all the work and thoughtfulness that goes into a lot of this. So thank you all. Deacon or Miss Marcia, any final thoughts?
No, I'm not always able to come on Wednesdays, but whenever I do, I feel like I'm learning a lot, and I hope I am contributing substantively.
You are.
Absolutely, you are.
I appreciate your dialogue also.
Yeah, it's great.
All right, everyone. Have a
Chair?
good one. And
Chair,
Yes.
really quickly. You did hear from Kathy and Captain Hubbard that they won't be here. Are you not going to have a meeting on Wednesday the 26th, or what do you want
That's
to
a
do?
good idea. I need a break.
yeah, no, I think that would be a great opportunity
Okay.
for all of us to take a break. Yeah.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Okay.
the two of you for creating that excuse for us.
He's a great partner. We've got to be here when he's here.
Yeah,
All
absolutely.
right. Thanks for
All right, so we'll make a
confirming.
note and send out a reminder to folks.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Bye-bye.
Micah.
All right, good night,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.